Welcome to Perspectives on Islam from a Non-Muslim. My name is Elaine, and the subject today is what is Sharia and why everyone needs to know. So what is the follower required to believe in Islam? From the Quran we have, "It is not for a believing man or a believing woman when Allah and his messenger have decided a matter that they should have any choice about their affair. And whoever disobeys has strayed into clear error." So what you see here now is from a handbook of Sharia law. And what it says is, "None of you believes until his inclinations conform to what I have brought." And again, repeats what the Quran says. When Allah and his messenger have decided a matter, no believer has a choice in their affair. Again, from the handbook of Sharia law, what the lawgiver decides is the good of those who are morally responsible. That would be Allah or Muhammad. And the measures of good and bad is Sharia, not reason. This again comes from the Quran. "We put you, Muhammad, in an ordained way concerning the matter of religion." Now, what I'm referring to here when I say a handbook of Sharia is this book here. It's called Reliance of the Traveler. It's from the 14th century. This is a 2015 edition translated. It's very good, and it is exactly what it says it is. It's for a traveler. Because there are thousands of hadith, to make a decision about every little thing and going through all these hadith would be most cumbersome. So it is handy to have it in a little manual. Now, there are, of course, many fatwas decisions that are made outside this. This is for convenience only, and this is certainly not all of Sharia. Sharia is the ordained way of Allah and Muhammad. This is what we were just looking at there. It is everything that is contained in the Quran and the Hadith in practice. Now, here's some recommendations from the beginning of this book. One of them is from Al-Azhar University over here, which you may be familiar with. This one is from the International Institute of Islamic Thought. And I'll read this. It says, "The translation is far from literal, but it does not exceed the author's intent, thereby demonstrating the translator's knowledge of sacred law." So this is very important. It's not literal, and you'll see some examples of that as we go through. Now, the subject headings include, and we'll go through quite a few of them, Zakat, which is an Islamic tax, how it is spent, who can receive it, not non-Muslims. Trade, loans, collateral, bankruptcy, partnerships, finance, rent, and endowments. Inheritance, estate division, male or female, and prevention, non-Muslims cannot inherit. Purity, trimming fingernails and toenails, using toothsticks, circumcision, dyeing hair and dogs. Marriage, conjugal rights, defects, child custody, bride's guardian and bride price. Divorce, who may affect, only a man. 3 pronouncements are required, and payment for release by the wife. Justice, that's a big section. Retaliation and indemnity, apostasy, jihad, spoils of battle, non-Muslim subjects of Islamic State, penalties, including scourging, stoning, theft, drinking, oaths and expiation for judgeship, court claims, witnessing and testifying. Enormities, not paying zakat, sodomy and lesbianism, drinking, fleeing combat in jihad. As you can see, this is very comprehensive and is, in fact, exactly what you would expect to find in law for an entire country or something. This is not just limiting itself to prayer and things like that. And holding one's tongue, slander, informing on one another, permissible and obligatory lying, joking, musical instruments, and keeping secrets. So in Islam, all human activity, legal, moral, ethical, falls into one of 5 categories. It's obligatory, it's recommended, permitted, discouraged, and forbidden. It's the foundational doctrine that determines what is and what is not halal or haram, good or bad, not this book. It comes from the foundational doctrine. And the purpose of this is to show you how the doctrine is arrived at. It comes from the law is arrived at, decisions are arrived at. It comes from the foundational doctrine. I will always show you examples of that. So this is from the handbook. It is adequate for one to believe everything brought by Muhammad. And what befits the common people is to refrain from discussing the subtleties of scholastic theology, lest corruption, difficult to eliminate, find its way into their basic religious convictions. And here's an example. This is from the Hadith. Whoso obeys me obeys God, and whoso disobeys me disobeys God, which means to obey Muhammad is the same as obeying God. So Muhammad is extremely important. Everyone's familiar with the Quran, but also Muhammad. He is in the Hadith, and these are both the foundational, together they are the corpus of Islamic law. To put it in context, you need to know the biography, the correct biography of Muhammad. I recommend this one. This dates back to the 8th century and is very complete. I'll show one example of it as we go along. So apostates may be killed. People who do not follow, who are said to be Muslim and do not follow the foregoing that we just saw, they can be killed for leaving Islam. So when a sane person reaches puberty and voluntarily apostatizes, he deserves to be killed. There is no indemnity for killing an apostate, or because this is like killing someone who deserves to die. And here we have an example from the foundational doctrine. This is a hadith from Bukhari. The blood of a Muslim cannot be shed except in 3 cases. For example, one who reverts from Islam and becomes an apostate. So acts that entail leaving Islam is to revile Allah or Muhammad, to deny that Allah intended Muhammad's message to be the religion followed by the entire world. This is like leaving Islam, to deny this. Here's an example. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieved, so strike them on the necks and upon every fingertip. Now note, I've circled the word strike because we'll come back to that later. When a slave runs away and reverts to polytheism, he may be lawfully killed. So it applies to slaves as well. There are other consequences. So someone who reverts from Islam, this is considered a defect in the spouse, permitting the annulment of a marriage. So if one of a couple who are idolaters becomes a Muslim, and one of a Zoroastrian couple becomes a Muslim, the wife of a Jew or Christian becomes a Muslim, both the husband and wife leave Islam, or one of them does. So if you're in, say, a Christian marriage and one of the partners becomes a Muslim, then that is considered to have annulled the marriage. So do not marry polytheistic women until they believe, and do not marry polytheistic men to your women until they believe. This is the foundational doctrine from the Quran. So children are not exempt from this. A child of 7 is ordered to fast, and at 10 is beaten for not fasting. And the same goes for prayer. At 7 years of age, they are ordered to pray, and when they're 10, they are beaten for neglecting it. And this carries over to school, so it's offensive to send a child to a daycare run by non-Muslims where religion is not mentioned. And this is from the foundational doctrine here. This is a hadith. Command a boy to pray when he reaches the age of 7. When he becomes 10, then beat him for prayer. This is from Muhammad. Making up missed prayers is obligatory. Remember, we were talking about what's obligatory and what's only recommended. Making up missed prayers is obligatory. And a Muslim who misses a prayer out of unconcern cannot, by that fact alone, be considered an unbeliever. So here are some examples of making up prayers. And this is a man who slept or forgot it. Another, if you missed a prayer through business. And Muhammad himself, if he missed the night prayer owing to pain or for any other reason, he would make it up. Now, there was something last year where the Taliban, it was noted in the news, was not allowing girls over the age of 12 to go to school. And a lot of Islamic scholars came out and said, look, Islam does not ban a child's education. So why does the Taliban? And that's true. It doesn't ban a child's education. But the education that is demanded by Islam is very limited. Here we are, the guardian must teach the child about purification, prayer, and fasting, and train your children in points of Islamic behavior. Of course, at the time of Muhammad, there were no schools like we see them now. So, of course, it's not mentioned in the foundational doctrine as a school, but the teaching is certainly mentioned, and a school isn't required for this. And from the Quran, abide in your houses, we're referring to women here, and do not display yourselves as from the former times of ignorance. Allah only intends to remove from you impurity, sin, and to purify you. Purity comes up quite a lot in Islam. So here's an example. Purity. Circumcision is obligatory for both men and women. Now, when we read this, it says for men, it consists of removing the prepuce from the penis. And for women, removing the prepuce, Arabic bazar, of the clitoris, but not the clitoris itself. But if you look up the word bazar, you will find that in fact it is clitoris. And this is an example of an incorrect translation. As we read in the beginning in the recommendations, they said it was far from literal. And when you find a discrepancy like this, it's sometimes necessary to check. So if you copy the Arabic into Google, you will see both males and females must have circumcision, while female circumcision is cutting off the clitoris. And that's right from the Arabic. Now, from the foundational doctrine, when two circumcised parts meet, then bath is obligatory. The messenger of Allah and I did that, and we bathed. This is from Aisha, the wife of Muhammad. And as you can see, this is still happening today. This is a British case. A 3-year-old was taken to Kenya. And again, purity. It is sunnah, that means something from Muhammad, to trim the fingernails and toenails, to clip one's mustache. It is unbelief to turn from the sunnah in order to imitate the non-Muslims when one believes their way to be superior. It is offensive to use the vessels of non-Muslims, since non-Muslims are not as concerned about purity as Muslims are, or to wear their clothes for the same reason. And again, from the foundational doctrine, disbelievers in the oneness of Allah and Muhammad are nasjan, impure. And this word will come up again later, dirty. Now, one of the reasons to know about Sharia is because there's a bit of a craze recently on TikTok, and this has to do with the fighting in Gaza. And a lot of young people are wanting to show their support for Gaza by declaring they have adopted the Muslim faith when they really don't know too much about it. So it's really helpful to, if you can, share this video with young people so they can share the information in it and know more about it before they make a decision like this. And you can see an example here. This video has gone quite viral, and it's a young British boy in a classroom, and he is taking the Shahada, converting to Islam, right in the schoolroom. And what about the rest of the family? So we have the wife here. When a husband notices signs of rebelliousness in his wife, he can warn her, and if she continues, he may hit her. So what are the obligations for a wife? It is not lawful for a wife to leave the house except by the permission of her husband, nor may a wife permit anyone else to enter her husband's home unless he agrees. And it is obligatory for a wife to obey her husband, as is customary, in allowing him full lawful sexual enjoyment of her person. And if she does not fulfill any one of the above mentioned obligations, she is termed rebellious. And I think at this point, it's good to mention, of course, you know, this is not necessarily being followed in its entirety everywhere that Islam is practiced. As Islam grows stronger, for example, Afghanistan, in Iran, the foundational doctrine can be enforced in its entirety, but it's a process. So it may be happening in a single home right now, but later actually be the law of the country, depending on how strong Islam is. So again, we want to check discrepancies. I was reading this hadith and noticed it said a nudge on the chest, and somehow that didn't seem right. Muhammad was quite angry with his wife, Aisha. She had followed him, and he said that the angel Gabriel came to him and he called to Muhammad and let him know that Aisha was following him. And then I read it in another source, and instead of saying that Muhammad nudged Aisha on the chest, it said that he struck her on the chest, causing her pain. And the other one just said, which she felt. So there's quite a difference there. Well, I have a very good friend in Belgium, and he's an Orientalist. He's an expert on the subject, and I showed it to him. So he did some very serious digging on this and went into Lane's lexicon and sent this to me, which I much appreciate. And the word used in both of these hadith from the Arabic is actually to strike on the chest, causing pain, inflicting swelling and bruising. And you will see sometimes that a hadith, a translation has been softened to make it more palatable. However, the correct translation is to cause pain and hit violently. This is the same strike that I noted earlier and circled, that is the same word that was used there, Quran 8:12. And this is also used in Quran 38:44, in which Job strikes his wife. Now, you might be familiar with the prophet Job. He's in the Old Testament. And according to Islam, all of the prophets in the Old Testament, the New Testament in the Bible, are Muslim. Adam was Muslim, Job was Muslim, Abraham, they were all Muslim. And the stories are different. Actually, I have Ibn Kathir, he's in the 14th century, Stories of the Prophets, where he collected other sources besides the foundational doctrine to tell more detailed stories about the lives of the prophet. And in it, he speaks about Job and Job striking his wife. Now, in the Old Testament, Job does not strike his wife, but he does in the Quran. And if anyone wants to check the translation, here's Lane's lexicon, so they can have a look at it. So marriage, well, I'll carry on with that. The husband's right. A husband possesses full right to enjoy his wife's person. And I said that I would show you an example from the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq. Now, that's from the 8th century, and as you can see, it's consistent. And from the foundational doctrine, the Quran, men are in charge of women. You warn them first. If you fear rebellion, you can banish them or scourge them or beat them, depending on the translation. So this, of course, has an effect. In Canada, a new Muslim-focused domestic violence shelter was built. It's finished now. Because, as it says here, shelter providers in Calgary found that up to 40% of women seeking help were visible Muslims, even though at that time, the population of Muslims in Canada was only about 2.5%. Marriage, again, looking at members of the opposite sex, is unlawful, and it's unlawful for a woman to show any part of her body to an adolescent boy or a non-Muslim woman, sorry. So this can be a little difficult when you're looking at the medical system. Doctors treating patients of the opposite sex. It says when there is a real need, a Muslim woman needs medical attention, she must be treated by a Muslim woman doctor. And if there is none, then a non-Muslim woman doctor. And if there is none, then a male Muslim doctor. And if none of those are above or available, then a male non-Muslim doctor. But if the doctor is of the opposite sex, her husband or an unmarriageable male relative must be present. And from the Quran, tell the believing men to lower their gaze from looking at forbidden things. So guardians are of two types: those who may compel their female charges to marry someone and those who may not. And the only guardians who may compel their charge to marry are a virgin bride's father or father's father, meaning to marry her to a suitable match without her consent. And here we have from the Hadith, the Prophet engaged me when I was a girl of 6. This is his favorite wife, Aisha. And the marriage was consummated when she was 9. They prepared her for marriage, and he came in the forenoon, and she was handed over. So we have in Iran, which follows the Sharia very closely, child marriage is over 7,000 girls under 14 married in 3 months. This is from 2020. I believe last year there were 172 girls that were registered for marriage under the age of 9. In Iran, it's quite prevalent. So who may affect a divorce? A divorce is valid only from the husband. And the age of the woman, just to confirm here from the Quran, it says that in regards to divorce, women have to wait 3 months before they can marry again. And this is also the case for those who have not yet menstruated. So that means prepubescent girls. And in the Sharia handbook, it says that the divorce can be handled by an agent. And this is in the foundational doctrine. If he has divorced her for the 3rd time, she is not lawful to him. A woman has no right to custody of the child from a previous marriage when she remarries. So if she was Muslim and became non-Muslim, if she married, if she was Muslim and married a Muslim, then she is not entitled to custody. And here's an example of that. So this is a woman who escaped Saudi Arabia and may have to send the child back. Okay, she's married again, I believe. And there's another case happening at the same time. She was held captive in Saudi Arabia and was forced to leave behind her 8-year-old daughter. And the lawyers refused to take her case in Saudi. They said, you have no chance. And I'll read this here. Both Americans' cases reveal how Saudi Arabia's laws treat women and foreigners in child custody fights, where fathers are the default guardians of their children. Inheritance, so estate division. This might surprise you to find that because Islam allows polygamy, there may be up to 4 wives, and they will jointly receive 1/4 if there are no children, or 1/8 if there are children of the estate when her husband dies. And this is from the Quran, as you can see here. In what you leave, their share is 1/4. If there is a child, they get 1/8 to share between them. The four preventatives of inheriting, there's four, as you can see, and that is, it is invalid and unlawful for a non-Muslim to inherit property through an estate division from a Muslim or vice versa. And here we have the foundational doctrine, the Hadith. Muhammad said, a Muslim cannot be the heir of a disbeliever, nor can a disbeliever be the heir of a Muslim. Now, Zakat is an Islamic tax. As you can see, we're going through those topics that were listed at the beginning of the manual. So Zakat is an Islamic tax, and there are 8 categories. I think most people are familiar with this. It's often called an Islamic charity. Now, the legal recipients include jihad, 1/8 of the zakat to each category. And the 7th category is those fighting for Allah, meaning people engaged in Islamic military operations for whom no salary has been allotted. They are volunteers. It is not permissible to give zakat to a non-Muslim. And this is from the foundational doctrine here, that the zakat is only for, and it lists them, to attract the hearts of those who are inclined towards Islam, to encourage people to convert, or they're leaning that way, and also for Allah's cause, for those fighting in the holy wars. Now, the zakat is detailed here, and this book more rightly belongs in the section about trade, because all Islamic finance and trade must conform to these Sharia standards. It must have a Sharia board. It must follow Sharia law. So here's an example of the book. And the section on zakat is section 35, page 896. The obligatory character of jihad. So now we're into justice, which is a large section. So jihad is a communal obligation. Muhammad said, he who provides the equipment for a soldier in jihad has himself performed jihad. So there are various ways of performing jihad, money and equipment. And this is from the Hadith, but it was a very long one. There wasn't really room to copy it on here, so I've only taken this section of it. And the Prophet said, I command you with 5 that Allah commanded me: listen and obey, jihad, hijrah, and the Jama prayer. So this is Tirmidhi 2863. You can look it up. So the Caliph makes wars upon Jews, Christians, and Zoroastrians, and he has to invite them first. But if they do not convert to Islam, then they must either become Muslim or pay this non-Muslim poll tax. It's called the jizya. From the Quran, fight against those who believe not in Allah, nor forbid that which has been forbidden. And that means the Sharia. And this is whether they're Jews and Christians or not, until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. So jihad means to war against non-Muslims and to establish the religion. And as you can see in this case, and sometimes, the handbook will actually put the foundational doctrine as a reference right there for you, so you don't have to look it up. So there's 3 examples there. But here's another one. Allah has purchased from believers their lives and their property. So they fight in the cause of Allah and they kill and are killed. When a child or woman is taken as a captive, they become slaves, and the woman's previous marriage is immediately annulled. There's also booty from jihad. 20% of it is supposed to be for Allah and Muhammad. Okay, but when Muhammad was conducting jihad, sometimes it was only necessary to send some emissaries, and the community would decide to convert to Islam and pay tribute and become dhimmis, which are secondary citizens. In any case, if there was no fighting, then 100% would go to Muhammad and Allah, but otherwise only 20%, and the other 80% would be divided amongst the jihadis. So legal testimony is only acceptable from a witness who is free, religious, and Muslim. And there's the Quranic reference. So those who disbelieve from among the scripture will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures, as it says above, the vilest form of corruption. So when an adult male is taken captive, so that's item A here, is free. When an adult male is taken captive, he has some options: death, slavery, release without paying anything, or ransoming himself in exchange for money or some Muslim captive. But if the prisoner becomes a Muslim, then he may not be killed. And that is because it's only possible to ally with Muslims. Let not believers take disbelievers as allies rather than believers, except when taking precaution against them. That means deception to cover up following Islam. So the testimony of the following is legally acceptable in regards to property and sales: 2 men or 2 women and a man. If testimony does not concern property, such as a marriage or legal penalties, then only 2 male witnesses. The necessary qualifications for being a judge are to be a male free man, and the indemnity for death by mistake for a woman is half that as a man. So the point of this is that you can see that the legal worth of a woman is half that of a man, and sometimes not at all. For instance, they could not be an Islamic judge. And the source of this is this hadith and others. Muhammad said, women give alms, as I have seen that the majority of dwellers in hell are women. And the women asked, why? He says, I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. Muhammad said, is not the evidence of 2 women equal to the witness of 1 man? They said, yes. He said, this is the deficiency in her intelligence. Who is subject to retaliation for injurious crimes? Retaliation is obligatory. Okay, you must retaliate against anyone who kills a human being intentionally and without right. However, the following are not subject to retaliation, and that would be a Muslim for killing a non-Muslim, for killing an apostate from Islam, there is no consequence, or against a father and mother for killing their offspring. Nor is retaliation permissible to a descendant, such as when a son, say his father kills his mother. They're not entitled to retaliation. There is no expiation for killing someone who has left Islam, even when someone besides the caliph kills him. From the Quran, violations, fighting, okay, is in the sacred month, and is all right in the sacred month, because all violations, there is legal retribution. So whoever has assaulted you, then assault him in the same way. Sorry, I messed that up a little bit. But anyway, the point is that it is in the foundational doctrine that if someone has assaulted you, you feel they have assaulted you, you can retaliate in the same way, or there is the option to pay blood money. By the way, feel free to stop at any time and have a closer look at this doctrine. I know it's quite a bit. Still in justice, the penalty for theft, a person's right hand is amputated, whether he is Muslim or non-Muslim. And if he steals a second time, his left foot, the third time, his left hand. If he steals again, then his right foot. And this is from the Quran. As for the thief, both male and female cut off their hands. And corrupt people, who are corrupt people, because this is significant. Corrupt people are those who have committed an enormity. And this means that somebody has done something against an unequivocal text from the Quran or hadith. A legally corrupt or immoral person is someone who is guilty of this. And that is why we have from the Quran, take not as your friends or advisors those outside your religion. They will do their best to corrupt you. They desire to harm you. Hatred has appeared from their mouths, but what their breasts conceal is far worse. This is what people are taught. The penalty for fornication or sodomy, it doesn't matter whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, subjects of an Islamic state, or someone who has left Islam. The offender is someone who has the capacity to remain chaste. He or she is stoned to death. And a pregnant woman is not stoned until she gives birth. And I have seen film footage of this occurring. And from the Hadith, the Prophet said, if she commits that she has committed illegal sexual intercourse, then stone her to death. Now we're into enormities. So this is really forbidden, into the forbidden category here. Masculine women and effeminate men. Muhammad cursed effeminate men and masculine women. He curses men who wear women's clothing and women who wear men's. And this is from the Hadith. Muhammad cursed effeminate men and those women who assume the manners of men. He said, turn them out of your houses. Sodomy and lesbianism from the from Reliance of the Traveler, the manual. In more than one place, the Quran speaks about Lot, and that's where quite a bit of this comes from. And you see the Quranic reference there. He says, kill the one who sodomizes and the one who lets it be done. Lesbianism by women is adultery between them, and we've seen the sentence for adultery. More enormities. A wife's rebelling against her husband. Men are the guardians of women. Righteous women will be obedient. If you fear their intractability, you may hit them, and they should remain in their homes and not display beauty as they did in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. Obligatory clothing outside the home refers to the entire body. It's forbidden to reveal it. And from the Quran, tell your wives and your daughters and women to bring down over themselves their outer garments so that they will be known and not be abused. And it is important to point out here that, of course, this means that for women who are not so veiled, they are recognized as available to be abused. Acts that entail leaving Islam is to deny that Allah intended Muhammad's message to be the religion followed by the entire world. And here you see from the Hadith, Allah drew the ends of the world near one another for my sake. And the dominion of my ummah would reach those ends which have been drawn near me, and I have been granted the red and white treasure. This is Muhammad speaking. And another enormity, unexpected one maybe, is making pictures. Muhammad said, every maker of pictures will go to the fire, where a being will be made to set upon him for every picture he made to torment him in hell. And here's an example from the Hadith. So the people who will receive the severest punishment from Allah will be the picture makers. And you know, there's something else I should mention at this point, because there are time periods here. That's why knowing the life of Muhammad is so very important, is because in the earlier period, prior to the beginning of the Islamic calendar, there are verses that are softer and gentler. They're still true because they came from Allah, but many of them have been abrogated. Now, an example would be from the early time in Mecca. You've heard, I'm sure, the saying, to you is your religion and to me is mine. But the later verses, and that's why I'm doing this, is because there are many verses people don't ordinarily hear unless they're living in an Islamic country, but they're part of the corpus nevertheless. So that's why when you see these and you think, but I thought it didn't matter what religion you were, the verse to you, your religion, and to me, mine, is actually from the period before the beginning of the Islamic calendar, when there was no violence. The beginning of the Islamic calendar begins with the migration to Medina, and at that time jihad was adopted, and the verses are quite different. So now trade. If a Quran is being purchased for someone, it is obligatory that the person be Muslim. In fact, non-Muslims have not really had access to Islamic doctrine until the last couple of decades. Now they're, well, easy access. The reason for that being, of course, is that now 80% of the world's Muslims don't actually speak Arabic, and they're in many countries. And the foundational doctrine has been translated now into the language of those countries, so other people are able to read them, and the doctrine is now more available. Now, here is an example from the Quran. None should touch it except the purified, which does not include the non-believer. And trade also includes adoption. It is unlawful in Islam when it means giving a child one's own name or a share of one's estate. And that comes from the Quran. Allah has not made for any man two hearts, nor has he made your adopted sons your sons. And purity. It is invalid to transact something that is impure in itself, such as a dog. Allah's messenger ordered that the dog should be killed. Of course, there's a great deal more in trade, but this gives you an example of how diverse that the doctrine about trade is. And the Reliance of the Traveler, the Sharia manual, did not translate the section on slaves, K32.1. And what it says here is, because the issue is no longer current. I only wish that was true. As you can see here, slavery is still very much active in Niger alone. This is from 2022. They estimate there are 130,000 slaves in Niger, which is an Islamic country. Holding one's tongue is a section of the manual. The Prophet Muhammad said, "The talebearer will not enter paradise. The Muslim is the brother of the Muslim. He does not betray him, lie to him, or hang back from coming to his aid. That all of the Muslim is inviolable to his fellow Muslim." And here from the doctrine, "You who have believed, do not spy or backbite each other." And an enormity is to show others the weak points of Muslims. And here from a hadith, Muhammad said, "Whoever conceals the faults of a Muslim, Allah will conceal him his faults in this world and the day of resurrection." So it's rewarded. So scholars say there is no harm in giving a misleading impression if it is required by an interest countenanced by sacred law, which means that it is permitted or recommended or even obligatory. For example, from the Quran, freedom from all obligation is declared from Allah and Muhammad to the unbelievers with whom they have made a treaty. And up here, outright lying is permissible in 3 cases: war, settling disagreements, and a man talking with his wife or she with him. From the Hadith, Muhammad said, "War is deceit." And he was heard to say, "He who makes peace between the people by inventing good information or saying good things is not a liar." And deception, such as omitting important information to leave an erroneous impression, is preferable, but it is permissible to lie when the goal is permissible, and obligatory if the goal is obligatory. Well, what's permissible and obligatory? Fight those who do not believe in Allah or the last day and who do not follow Sharia. Fight until they give the jizya willingly while they are humbled. More things in holding one's tongue you might not expect. Musical instruments. Allah sent Muhammad as a guidance and commanded him to do away with musical instruments, flutes, strings, crucifixes, and the affair of the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. He particularly disliked bells. So here's an example. You see the photographs, and from the Hadith, Muhammad said, Allah will destroy the musical instruments. Yeah, during the night, he will transform those people into monkeys and pigs, and they will remain so. So there's a very important principle called darura that not too many people are aware of. That's necessity. And this is how many people practiced Islam in non-Islamic countries for decades, with apparently not too much difficulty that anyone was aware of. There was no Islamic finance or prayer rooms in schools, and they were here practicing Islam. So this is because of the principle of darura. So dispensation is when what is normally forbidden is made permissible because of necessity or need. So if there's no Islamic finance available, then there's no problem with taking out an ordinary student loan, for example. So here are examples from the handbook that of necessity is that a woman is not supposed to leave the house except with permission of her husband, but she may do so without permission when there is a pressing necessity. One is excused an interruption if the need arises, since necessity excuses one from any rule whatever, but only to the degree demanded by necessity. So when you look up darura in the Brill Encyclopedia of Islam, it says, you know, this is to describe the necessities or demands of social and economic life. No one's perfect. So but most of the offenses committed under the rule of necessity are excused without any form of punishment. So if there's, you know, only a vegetarian lunch available and you choose to eat that, it's not halal, but it's vegetarian, that's just fine, or ordinary beef. And in fact, that is also in the Quran. And here it is. So he has only forbidden you dead meat, blood, the flesh of swine, and food other than that which the name of Allah, in which the name of other than Allah. So if it has been blessed in some other name has been invoked. But if one is forced by necessity without willful disobedience, then Allah is forgiving and merciful. So we'll finish up here. And what most people are familiar with is the Universal Code of Human Rights, which states there is freedom of religion and all are equal before the law. Now, we have just gone over Sharia, where there is no freedom of religion and no equality before the law. So these are two goals that are mutually exclusive and incompatible. And this is something to think about when making important decisions. I want to thank you for your attention, and please like, share, and subscribe, but especially share. You saw the section about the children converting, and they have no knowledge about Islam, and it would be really helpful if they did. Links below. Thank you very much.